Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. And in today's video, I'm going to give you a very easy and simple beginner's guide to the Caro-Kann defense. My favorite defense against 1e4 is actually the French defense, but I have to admit, being a French defense player, the French has some issues, some drawbacks that the Caro-Kann doesn't have. And if you are a beginner, I highly recommend you playing the Caro-Kann instead of the French, because you have so many open lines and it's easy to develop your pieces, and this is perfect for a beginner. I just rather play the French because I've been playing it for a long time and I feel more comfortable in the French positions. But if you are a beginner, I think you're gonna feel more comfortable playing the Caro-Kann because you have more open lines and more easy development. But before we begin, I'd like to ask you to subscribe to the channel for more videos like this one. We are counting our numbers to get to the 1,000 subscriber mark, so I would really appreciate if you could subscribe to the channel. But enough talk and let's get right into it. And of course, the Caro-Kann is a defense you play against 1e4, so you expect your opponent to play this opening move, and then you can play the c6. This is the first move that is going to characterize the Caro-Kann defense. You're playing this move for a very specific reason. You are trying to prepare this move with d5. You're not just going to play d5 right away. You're going to prepare by playing c6 first, so you can play this move safely. And in case your opponent takes it, you can take back with your pawn, and you're going to have a central pawn. Okay, so that's the whole idea behind the move c6. We're just playing this to prepare d5, so in case your opponent takes it, we can just take back. And in this video, we're going to see the three most common variations of the Caro-Kann defense: the exchange variation when white actually takes the pawn, the advanced variation when they advance the pawn, and classical variation when they defend the pawn with the knight. There are many other variations, but these are the three most common ones. So white's gonna play d4 and you play d5. That's the whole idea behind the move c6, right? We are preparing the move d5, so that's why we're gonna play it. That's why we played c6 in the first place. And now white has plenty of options, and one of the most common options here are taking, advancing, or defending the pawn with knight, right? So they are defending this pawn, okay? Because if they don't do anything, we're probably going to take it. So that's the idea. And one of the problems of the French defense, like I said, is this bishop right here that is usually stuck behind this pawn, but this pawn hasn't moved, so this bishop is free. That's why this opening seems to be better in this idea, in this sense. The most common move probably at the beginner levels is taking the pawn. So white's going to take and you are going to take back. That's why you played c6 in the first place, to just capture back in case they take your pawn. And then you're going to end up with this half open file here, the c open file. So you can place your rook here later and you can attack using this half open file. Your opponent's going to develop, and then you're going to follow very simple development, very simple plan. You're going to start developing your knight here to c6. The idea is to attack this pawn, and your opponent might play like two lines here, developing the knight or pushing this pawn right here and challenging your pawn. Your play is going to be a little bit different in those two situations, but not too much. So the most common move here is knight c3. In case you're just going to keep your development, you're going to see that you're going to develop these pieces first here on the queen side, and this bishop is often going to come here to pin this knight whenever it's possible. Okay, sometimes we're going to take this knight, not all the times, but sometimes we're going to take it because we are removing the defender of this pawn. This pawn is defended by the knight, so if we remove this knight, this pawn is suddenly going to be here for the taking. So your opponent's probably going to break the pin by developing the bishop to e2. You just now close the diagonal. You see that now these pawns are making a chain here, and this bishop is outside of the chain. In the French defense, it's usually here. That's why it's a little bit passive, because it's striking at its own little friend right here. So what we're going to do here is follow our development plans. White's going to castle. We are going to develop our bishop, usually going to come to this square. And after, let's say, they try to threaten our bishop, we just drop it back. Many situations, we're just going to drop it back here and keep an eye on this knight. Bishop e3 might be played here by white. You just develop your other knight and you're ready to castle next move. And you developed all your pieces. Very simple gameplay. You can bring your rook to the half open file. You can start advancing these pawns right here on the queen side. It's a very easy game plan for black here. All your pieces are developed and you have some great game in front of you. What happens is here in this position, white can actually go ahead and play c4. And this is striking at your pawn right away. So you can't simply come here and develop this bishop. You have to go ahead and defend this pawn first. But that's pretty much it. If they take, you can capture back. So if they develop the knight now, you can go ahead and pin the knight. And this is the idea, right? So just had to make one move first to defend this pawn. And now you can follow up with your plan, developing that bishop. If they take, you just take back. This move is a little bit tricky, so you have to be careful. It's aiming at this pawn right here. So you have to be careful about that. In this case, we can take this knight. We're going to force them to take back with the pawn here. They have no other option since this queen has moved and it's attacking here, but it can't capture back, so they have to capture with the pawn, which is not really good for them. And here you can just defend your knight. Your knight was a little bit loose here because you have a lot of pieces attacking it. And after queen takes that pawn, you let them take that. Don't worry. You're going to take that pawn in the center and it's basically a trade, okay? So bishop can apply this check. You just take and you're trading pieces here. You block the check with your queen. If they take, you just take back with your king. It's not a big deal because you're now in an endgame where you have a much better pawn structure. You see you have just 2 pawn island. You have this isolated pawn here, but black's much better than white in this position because this pawn structure, they have 3 pawn island, isolated, and doubled here. So this is much better for black. You can keep developing your pieces. If they take, you just take back. And you can just develop this bishop right here and bring your rooks to the game. And it's going to be much better for you because your pawn structure is much better. Okay, so this is pretty much it for the exchange variation. Of course, very simple game plan here. You just take back with your pawn, develop your knight, develop your bishop, then you push your pawn, develop your other bishop, your knight, castle short, and you have a great game to play. Very easy, very simple, but your opponent might play this move right here, which is the advanced variation. So in this case, we're going to strike with c5, which is a little bit different from what we were playing before. We could try to develop this bishop and then close this diagonal and play something more like a French advanced variation, but that's not why we're playing the Caro-Kann, right? We're playing the Caro-Kann to something more open and more sharp. So we play c5, attacking, you know, hitting this pawn right away. They play c3 to defend it. We play knight to c6, aiming at it once again. Knight f3 defends it. And then we, in this case, we are just pinning this knight. They are going to break the pin again. And now we can close this diagonal. We have the pawn chain. Remember, we put the bishop out first and then we close it with e6 because we don't want this bishop to be here inside the pawn chain. After the castle, we can develop our knight. Now we can't develop here. We don't have this square available because the pawn is taking away this square, but no problem. We can develop right here. And then from here, we have some crazy perspectives for this knight. We can bring it here or here, depending on what we want to do. After, let's say, h3, we can take this knight here. It's a good idea because we want to have this square free maybe in the future. So after we trade these pawns, we can go ahead and play queen to b6. And this idea here is that we are aiming at this pawn, making it hard for this bishop to develop and making it hard for anything actually to be done here. If they move this bishop, this pawn is dropping. And so let's see what happens here. If they move the bishop, the pawn drops. And if they try to move this knight away to defend the rook, remember that in this position here, this rook is being attacked, so they have to do something about it. If they play this move, knight d2, so now they defend the rook right here. We just play this move, attacking the bishop that moved here to e3. So now they have to do something about that too. If they play rook to b1 trying to hit our queen, we just take that pawn. If they take the other pawn, we just develop. We don't need to trade queens. We can just go back. We are ready to castle here if we want. And this position is good for us. If they go for a different move here, if they just develop the knight, now this can't be taken because the bishop's still protecting it, but the bishop's stuck here. They can't develop this bishop. It's really hard for them to do that. We can go ahead and take the other pawn because now this pawn is hanging, right? So they can't do the two things at once. The queen is aiming at the two pawns. So this pawn is immediately being threatened to be taken. If you want to come here and protect it, what's going to happen is that this one is going to fall. But if they stay here protecting this one, then this one's going to fall. So they have to choose which one to drop. If they go for the knight move and keep defending this pawn, then this one is going to drop. We can take it with the queen, forcing the queen trade here. And now we take, hitting the bishop right here. So they have to do something about that. We can trade it. Now they have a very bad pawn structure. And after knight to c6, we can continue our gameplay by developing the bishop, maybe bringing the bishop out here, castling short if we want. We can play a very easy game here. But of course, your opponent doesn't have to play this advanced variation. They can go for the knight here and play a more classical approach. And if that happens, all you have to remember is you can take this pawn now, right? So you can go ahead and take it. And after knight takes, you develop your knight. Now you are hitting their knight and they must do something about that. More often than not, they're going to take and then you just take back with your pawn. After knight f3, defending that pawn, no, it's overprotecting this pawn. You just develop your bishop and you are ready to castle here. So you can go ahead and castle very quickly. White's going to castle too. Again, remember this bishop belongs to this square, pinning this knight. They're going to have to do something about that later on. If they attack, you just drop back. You still keep this pressure here and pinning the knight. They're going to solidify their position. You develop your last minor piece, which is the knight. This is the final minor piece to develop. Rook e1, you can play your rook to e8. They take, you just take back. And you finish your development by bringing your rook to the semi-open file, which is a great game for you. So you have a great game as black here. So it's very simple. You have a very good pawn structure. And it's a great game, very easy to play as well. So that's what you have to remember. And if you want to play, if you want to experiment on playing the Caro-Kann Defense, I hope this guide is a good help for you. So it's a very introductory idea. It's like a beginner crash course. And if you follow this idea, you can basically play the Caro-Kann against pretty much anyone, because these are the most common variations you might face: the advanced, the exchange, or the classical variation. And if you like this video, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more. Leave a comment down below and I'll read and answer it. And as always, I see you guys in the next video.